the AZ Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, wow, joined by the awesome Jason Shear with the glasses. Very cool, Shear. Hello, Shear.
I'm getting old, Mike. My eyes aren't as good as I had to start wearing my glasses the last few days.
Yeah, all right. Now, all kinds of really good stuff to get to. We're going to talk a lot about the Big 12. We're going to talk. We're going to talk a lot about just expansion and pretty much everything that's going on here. Hold on just a second. I'm texting somebody. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. No, I was just telling Leah. Jacob was able to do it before, Leah. So if you could do that, it'd be awesome. Okay, now let's talk about the Big 12. Let's talk about the Big 12 and everything that is going on here. Listen, before we get to the next step, we need to talk about kind of where we are and how we got to this point. Now, remember last year at this time, there were a lot of people saying, oh, nothing's going to happen with the Pac-12, that everybody's on, great terms, nothing to see here, everything is great. And behind the scenes, it was not great. There was a lot of propaganda. There was a lot of nonsense that was going out left and right about pretty much everything. And lo and behold, guess what? We turned out to be right. The conference did blow up and there was nothing left. Now, we're talking about the Big 12 now and what their next move is. Brett Yormark is obviously a very ambitious person. And Shear, he has his eyes set on about 4 different schools, with 2 being the priority. This is going to get very interesting.
Yeah. And look, I think we need to start by saying, I tweeted what I tweeted last night, and there was no implication, but I want to be very clear. Nothing is imminent. This is not like super far down a path where we're days away and I'm pre-writing stuff and all that. But Brett Yormark very clearly believes, or the Big 12 believes, that they are in a position to eventually land Florida State and Clemson. And those, as you mentioned, would not be the only 2 schools that they would be able to land in that scenario.
All right. Now, there's a lot of different schools we're going to go over because they want to add. I mean, there's definitely room to be able to add, a number of schools. Yormark talked about that. That was one of the reasons that he went with the TV deal with and being able to make moves on the back end. So we'll talk about some of those schools. Digital Dam, I see you in here, and we'll get to you guys. But listen. There's a big thing here that I think people need to become versed with, because I get this all the time. Why in the world wouldn't so-and-so want let's see here. Why would Clemson or Florida State just not go to the Big Ten? Well, first of all, in the Big Ten, they are very, very big into academics there. The AAU is a huge part of all of this. And most of the schools we're talking about are not AAU accredited. And we're talking about Florida State. We're talking about Clemson. Miami is accredited. Those other 2 aren't. North Carolina, Duke are obviously accredited. So so that's something that is going to be a big thorn, I would say, for the Big Ten. Now, you make another point about the SEC as well as to why they might not like this. If you've only got a limited number of bids, which you already do you really want to bring in multiple places into your conference, or multiple entities into your conference that are going to be competing with you as they are marquee brands for some of those college football playoffs?
Yeah, so one of the issues that has kind of come up has been, and Yormark actually was asked about this but kind of didn't answer the question directly, is that behind the scenes, the Big Ten and the SEC want a certain number of guaranteed playoff spots. And obviously the Big 12 and other conferences aren't going to really be excited about that possibility. If that doesn't happen, and you're in Alabama or a Georgia, you don't necessarily want another, and beyond Alabama and Georgia, you don't necessarily want a team like a Florida State or a Clemson that could compete for a playoff spot and potentially take your spot away. Now, if somehow the SEC were to get a guaranteed number of playoff spots, I think, it would be more eager to take the Florida State and Clemsons of the world. The issue is that, talking to numerous people, there isn't a lot of confidence that would be able to get done in the new deal.
And what people need to understand too is, some people were tweeting at me and they're like, well, they don't look at the Big 12 as a step up. That's fine. It doesn't really matter at this point. It matters as to what's out there. There were people in the Pac-12, Utah, that did not want to go to the Big 12 under any circumstances. But guess what? The Pac-12 folded. The Big 12 was there. That is part of the genius of Yormark and all of this. And that, yeah, he might say, I might not have as many appealing options as some other, but guess what? I can give you a soft landing. And in this day and age, when it just comes down to stability in college football, being able to have that stability is something that I don't think you can really put a value on, Sheer.
Yeah, I think people are looking at it incorrectly. Gone are the days where you're looking for a step up. Now you're looking for survival and stability, right? If the ACC is going to the wayside, if the ACC isn't as strong of a conference as it once was, and you need to ensure your future for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, it's not a step up. If that's the argument you want to know, I disagree with that theory, the step up, step down, whatever. But you need to ensure your future as a university athletically. And if FSU looks at the ACC and believes that the ACC isn't going to be there in 5 years, and looks at the Big 12 and says there's a lot of stability, you could spare me with the step up, step down conversation. Anybody with more stability is a step up.
Right, and Yormark made this point, and Yormark made this point a number of times where he said, "Listen," he said, "at the end of the day, he said this is about being able to so we can have the strongest negotiating power going when we get to the Big or when that next round happens, in 2030, whatever the case may be. And if that does happen, then if you have these schools, it becomes impossible to box them out. Now, let's talk a little bit about what they would both provide. In this day and age, everybody knows that the Big 12 is the best basketball conference in the country. It is. I mean, you can just look at it from top to bottom. We already know that. 5 of the preseason top 10 teams likely from the Big 12. Then when it comes to football, it's solid. You're going to have 5 preseason teams in the top 25, but I mean, we can call it the way it is. You don't necessarily have the name brands at that point. You don't have the real inner crust type schools. That is the next move for Yormark, in my opinion. You get Florida State, you get Clemson. Those are 2 top 10 national brands, Sheer, which would change everything and the trajectory of how this goes about.
Yeah, just focusing on football. Basketball, there is name brands, obviously, with Kansas, Arizona, and others. But football-wise, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, there isn't that one national brand. There's good football teams. That's not what I'm saying. But there's not that brand where a random fan goes and buys a T-shirt, right? When you bring in a Florida State, a Clemson, a Miami, schools like that, you have that national brand. And so from a Big 12 perspective, it is an absolute no-brainer. Yormark wants to take over the country. Let's just be real here, right? Like, his goal is to have a footprint in every part of the United States. They've got Central Florida and all that. But, man, if you add Clemson, if you add Florida State, if you add Miami, all of a sudden your football program or your football conference that people said, oh, it's not that great. Like, it's a pretty solid conference, but there's no top-tier teams. Well, now that changes, right? And now I don't want to say they're on a level playing field as the SEC or Big Ten, but they're pretty damn close.
They're not that far off. And honestly, I want to get to this AAU accreditation here for a second, because this has been something that I have not understood from the beginning of time. And if I'm Brett Yormark, quite frankly, I don't care if a school is AAU accredited or not. It means absolutely nothing to me at this point. There are certain schools in there that are AAU accredited. There's ones that aren't. Half the SEC isn't AAU accredited. So that to me doesn't really mean anything. And Yormark's one job is to be able to get the most viable entity for basketball, for football, and everything. And that's where you're going to go after these. That's where you're going to go after these schools. Now, Miami, we're going to talk about some other ones. Miami's another one that now they are AAU accredited. That might be a little bit different, but Miami, you've got kind of a 4. I think you got basically a 4 that I think would be ideal. Sheer. You've got Florida State, you've got Clemson, you've got Miami, and you've got Louisville. I think those are the 4 that you feel very. If you can add those, you're drastically increasing basketball or football, and you're also getting a name basketball brand in there as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure, right, with Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State, like, those schools, I don't know if you mentioned NC State, but like those schools would be right there as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty clear top 4, right? And the thing is, Yormark has never hidden the fact that he believes there's a major future in basketball. But you look at Louisville, and what they've been able to do NLA-wise with football and basketball, and you assume the future athletically for Louisville is bright, and it's going to get to a certain point. We know what Florida State has. We know what Clemson has. We know what Miami has. Like those four, that's a very strong group. And then you wonder, based on other factors, does Virginia Tech, NC State come into play?
And I think the genius of all of this too is that if you get these schools, and this is to me where it's a little odd from the other conferences, if you're able to get these schools, when you go to the negotiation rounds, when that's coming up, guess what's not going to be brought into the negotiations, whether these are AAU accredited schools or not. Nobody's going to care about that when it comes to TV deals, when it comes to expanding, because again, half the SEC isn't AAU accredited at this point.
And I will say this from a personal preference. And we said this before. I think me and you, we both have said this 100 times. We watched the fall of the Pac-12 because of arrogance, whether it was AU or this school doesn't belong with us or that school doesn't belong with us. Brett Yormark is confident. He's not arrogant. So if it makes the conference better as a whole for everyone, but they're not AU accredited, we're going to have to get past it as a group because we're trying to strengthen ourselves as a whole here.
Right. And, honestly, just, kind of going back to the Pac-12 a little bit, we both had a pretty good source on what was going on during conference realignment. And what I found out about this, and this isn't meant to diss some national folks, because there's a lot of,
come on.
Yeah, there's a lot of national people that know what they're talking about. But on that Pac-12 realignment, there was next to nobody that knew what was going on. I mean, like I said, had a pretty good source here, about as good a one as you could. And he said, no, that's all nonsense. That's what they're telling you is nonsense. We're going to end up in the Big 12 one way or the other because the money isn't there. So all this talk about a great TV deal all around the corner, about how the Big 12 wouldn't take, or these schools wouldn't go there. Guess what? At the end of the day, the decision was made for them. And I think that is, again, that's what Yormark wants here. Yormark wants to be able to just kind of give you that soft landing where you know that you're going to be in a viable conference. And if you get Florida State, if you were able to get, and again, this is off for sure, but if you get Florida State, if you get Clemson, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more interesting than with, you can't just say that, all right, well, the SEC and the AC, or the SEC and the Big Ten, they all get 6 teams into the 14. And guess what? 2 other, at that point, your negotiation hand is a lot stronger.
Yeah, I mean, you're at the table equally, right? And that's the goal for the Big 12. That's the goal for the ACC. That was the goal for the Pac-12 before it dissolved. You want to be equal. And we're in a world of college football right now where it's hard. I don't think there's any denying that the SEC and the Big Ten are ahead of everybody else in terms of negotiation power and all that. So Yormark's goal, and he said it at Media Day, is to be on equal footing. And in order to get there, to be blunt, the schools that they have now, it's not going to happen. You need to make a bang, and that's where the Florida States and the Clemsons and the Miamis come in.
And one thing that Yormark wants to do, and I'm going to give a shout out to another group here that hasn't really been talked about a ton, but I think is kind of a little bit of a fascinating entity here. One thing that I think Yormark, and this is just me speculating, but you can kind of tell by where he's going and how they've expanded, is that he wants this to be a national conference. He wants this to be something where basically it's touching basically every part. And that's why it was so important for him to be able to get those corner 4 schools. That was that first move on the chessboard. If I get Arizona State, and the mountain schools, I have a real foothold out there. Now, one thing that he does want to do and he wants to improve is obviously football. It's going to go, and I think that he wants to expand into other regions. This is just a name that was thrown around a couple different times. So again, don't run with this and say that I'm reporting this as fact. One team that is going to, I think, maybe get a little bit of interest here is Oregon State. If all of this, again, they are not in the priority list or anything like that, but I think Oregon State could be something because, again, you've got a really rabid fan base. You got good football. It's been sustainable, and it's up. You kind of get into the Northwest. It's something to certainly keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, we're not talking top 6 here. Mike and I are not about to put Oregon State ahead of Louisville or Miami. Right. But there's a possibility that we do this thing all over again. And I think we are very clearly headed to 3 major conferences, right? And then you start to take a look at other schools that would be additions and all that. And if Yormark wants to get in the Northwest in some sort of market, Oregon State is there, right? And again, long way off from Oregon State. They're not necessarily a priority, but they're also not completely out of the picture. I think it's the
not
best way to say it.
It's not the non-entity that a lot of people think that
Right.
it is. So again, that's just something I wanted to throw that one out there. Now, getting back to the conference as a whole, then, if you were, so let's talk about some of these other schools then that I think also bring a little bit of cachet. North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, those are schools too that, again, not necessarily elite. I would definitely prefer North Carolina State because it's obviously they were in the Final Four this past year. You're also, football wise, not bad at all. But the options you're looking at really kind of strengthen it. Now, North Carolina State, I think, from a on the court, on the field, is kind of like Kansas State. Solid across the board, but not anything that's really going to make it different. But it's also something that would certainly still strengthen your conference, though, as well. Basically, this is what it comes down to, Sheer, is that he's going to make moves. And we're just kind of on this one, we're just kind of speculating. He's going to make moves. But the one thing that this dude does is he looks to hit the ball out of the park. That is what he is going for. He's not looking for the status quo. He's looking to get, and he was very straightforward about this, that when you get to that next round of negotiations, he wants to have as strong a hand as possible, and expanding and getting actual name brands in football would do just that for him.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Like Yormark, again, he has a vision. He's telling us what he wants to do, and he hasn't been wrong yet. And right. His vision is very clear. There were certain things at media day he wouldn't discuss, but he was very clear that he wants to bring Big 12 to prominence. And this is the way, he did the whole "we're open for business," right? He's open for business. He wouldn't have said that if these weren't discussions.
He's open for business. So let's also talk about it then. I want to get back into this a little bit when it comes to the Big Ten factor. And again, this is just kind of my tea leaves. Now, I think with North Carolina and Duke, those feel like Big Ten entities at this point. If you are going to, and again, that's just me speculating. They're especially Duke. You're a really good academic program, and on top of that, you can run roughshod over that crappy basketball in the Big Ten. It does not feel at all to me like an SEC. It's an Big 12's obviously not going to be an option for that one, but with so those two feel like that. Louisville, though, another one, doesn't really have a natural home. And people need to remember this as well when it comes to Louisville. I know that Louisville has been absolutely atrocious. I get all that the last couple of years. This is still one of the top 10, 11 basketball programs in the entire country. They rake in a ton of money, and football-wise, they've been pretty good as well. Louisville is definitely one that, you can understand why Louisville would be in that priority for.
Well, in order to win in college athletics, you need to spend money, right? NIL has to be a thing. It just has to be. And Louisville has it, a ton of it. Basketball, football, they have it, and they're willing to spend money. It's very similar to SMU, even though I put Louisville higher than SMU. SMU's in the ACC because it paid for it, right? Like it's got money. The ACC believes it's going to be successful because of that. Louisville has the foundation to be successful in athletics. It really does. And so what Yormark is probably saying is, look, I get that it's not the best right now, but 5 years from now, it's going to be selling out football and basketball. It has a rabid fan base. It's going to be a really nice addition here.
Louisville, with the right coach, you can compete in basketball. You can compete for national championships on a regular basis with the right coach. And in football, you can have a top 20 entity. We've seen both of those, and we've seen a lot of those. Plus, doesn't Louisville kind of feel like a natural fit in the Big 12? Doesn't it feel like that?
Yeah, and I want Louisville fans to know that Mike has more love for Rick Pitino than any college basketball coach of all time.
Yes. I mean, he's definitely.
I'll get random texts from Mike saying, what if Rick Pitino coached that team?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I think Rick Pitino's as good a college basketball coach as I've ever seen. That guy is fantastic. Maybe
I like Pat Kelsey, though. I think he was a solid hire. But yeah, I mean, Louisville feels at home, and that's something we talked about. Like, I grew up on the Pac-12 and all that, but when we went to media day, one of the first things we said to each other off the media, off the podcast and all that is, it felt like comfortable, right? Like it felt like we belonged there. And I think Louisville would very quickly feel the same thing.
And the fan base was absolutely great. I mean, the fan base has been fantastic. I think that's where this is also kind of exciting because, again, you're going to a place where it just felt like we were there. You just kind of felt like everything was you just kind of felt like everything was natural. And I think that's where it was kind of exciting with all of this. Now let's get to Florida State and Clemson again, because they're obviously the what do you call it? And whatever that term is. All right. But when you get to Florida State and Clemson, it makes sense. Now, listen, I know here's what's going to happen. You're going to see this on Twitter, and I guarantee it. You're going to see people saying Clemson and Florida State, they view the Big 12 as being beneath them. I get all of that. You know what? Guess what? Utah viewed the Big 12 as being beneath it. I can guarantee you Michael Crow viewed the Big 12 as being beneath him. Guess what? Guess who's in the Big 12 now? Utah and ASU. Just because you have this hoity-toity type mentality doesn't mean at the end of the day that, man, when we got to make a move, if that's the best option, then we're going to have to do that.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to suck it up, right? I mean, how many months, no disrespect to Utah fans, but how long did we hear from Utah fans and even their AD pretty much when he tweeted against the notion that they'd be in the Big 12, like, oh, it's beneath us. We got the Big 10. It's right there. And then eventually it's like, you're in the Big 12. Suck it up, right? And that's kind of what this is. Sure, I'm sure Clemson and FSU want to be in the SEC. Arizona wants to be in the SEC, right? We know for a fact Arizona called the SEC when this all started to go down, and the SEC said no thanks, right? Like that's how this works. And you may want to be somewhere, but that doesn't mean they want you. It takes two to tango.
Yeah, so all of this stuff about people coming at you and saying, oh, well, I talked with my buddy and he said they would never do that. Well, you know what? Sometimes you're going to do things that you might not necessarily want to do. And again, I'm going to keep harping on this. This goes back to having a seat when the next round of blowups happen, because what you don't want to do is be left on the outside looking in. And just looking at this from the outside, looking at the tea leaves, I do think that there is a very good possibility that the ACC in some way, shape, or form is not going to be the way that we know it in a year or two. I just don't see that. You've got, this is obviously being held up in court and stuff, but the blow up of the ACC is a very realistic possibility.
Yeah, so I think people have to realize, too, with reporting this, the first step is going to be whatever happens in those court cases, right? And when I say there's internal confidence in the Big 12, it means that like FSU, Clemson, the Big 12, they all feel this is going to go in the right direction for those three parties, right? And if that happens, who knows? I mean, I think the ACC gets blown up. I had a theory the other day that I think it's going to get blown up to the point where you're going to see Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford reform some sort of Pac-12 conference. That's me. I don't have that on inside information or anything. It just wouldn't surprise me at all because I think the ACC is headed towards blowing up a bit.
And another entity that we got to talk about here that I always get asked about, Notre Dame. There is less than zero chance that Notre Dame ends up in the Big 12. Notre Dame will always be independent, or they will be in the Big 10. It's going to be one of those two things. They're not there. That's a culture. I guess that's a better cultural fit, as the people like saying it. Also, with this cultural fit thing, what I think is so stupid about why the Pac-12 blew up and why we're now where we're at with the Big 12 is this whole thing that places are beneath you. I'll tell you one thing. You and I both graduated from the U of A, and we've joked about this a bunch of different times. Guess what? I do not view my education any differently being in the Big 12 as opposed to the Pac-12. None whatsoever. Do you? Do you know anybody that does?
No, that doesn't come up ever. Like if you go to a Harvard or something, maybe that comes up. If you went to like a Duke or something like that. But we don't have conversations. Someone goes, well, I graduated from, Rutgers. You just graduated from Arizona. That's not how this works. Like, who cares?
Nobody cares about that. Let's hear. They said Fortnite 24 says they said multiple times that they would only leave if Arizona left. U of A is an AAU school, correct? All right. Now with in Arizona, to be clear about this is another thing too that I think people kind of have some misremembrances on Twitter too, where they're like, oh well, the media deal is why everybody broke up. Arizona was leaving either way. Arizona had already applied for a Big 12 spot before Oregon or Washington left. I think a lot of people forget that, Sheer, and it's easy to forget. Arizona was getting out of this conference one way or the other.
Yeah, I think the reason is because Oregon and Washington took control of the narrative the morning this all went down by saying, oh, gosh darn, we really wanted to be part of the conference, but the deal just wasn't there. Arizona knew for days, if not weeks before that, it was leaving. Like, it wasn't, no one was, you saw natural guys going like, oh, there's still a sliver of hope. Meanwhile, Arizona's packing its bags already.
Yeah, there was no sliver of hope. Then Colorado was the first. Then Glenn, let's see here. Let's see. Fortnite 24 says, would the Pac-12 still be here if Arizona State and Utah didn't bite with? I don't know what that means.
It wouldn't it's once Oregon and Washington made it clear that they were leaving, and it was clear for much longer before it went public, those schools just weren't staying. I think the question is, if those two schools left and Arizona, Utah, and ASU stayed, would we still know the Pac-12 with like a San Diego State or whatever?
Yeah, and that was just that was just never going to work. Now, when it comes back to Yormark again, I want to get to Yormark, and we're going to talk some Arizona. I promise this, but when it comes to Yormark, this is the dude that you want running your conference, because, like we said, whether you want to leave the conference, whatever you look at the Big 12, the one thing is he is going to have a soft landing spot for you, and he made very sure of that. When it came to Arizona and the Four Corner schools, guess what? A bunch of them didn't want to leave. ASU, again, did not want to leave. Utah certainly didn't want to leave, but they still needed a place. They needed solidarity. They needed a place where you could have a soft landing. And guess what? Brett Yormark gave them just that. That's why he went ahead and he got the TV deal. That's why when you listen to some of the national folks, don't listen to what they're saying, because they kind of proved last time that they were just kind of grasping at straws. Now, what we're saying here isn't that anything is imminent, but the Big 12 certainly has Clemson and Florida State looking directly at them. And, again, if the SEC doesn't take them, they're going to end up in the Big 12, period.
So if you remember, it was like a year, I think it was like a year ago, right, where we reported that the Big 12 was going to have conversations with Arizona, Utah, Colorado, ASU. Right. We didn't say anything was imminent. We said there were preliminary conversations. Anything could happen within a year. That's kind of where we're at now, right? Nothing is imminent. And who knows how long court cases can last. There's things that have to happen. There's dominoes that have to fall. This is the same thing. I can't tell you, like, people are like, oh, you're not going to give us a day? No, I can't predict the legal system. So I can't. That's why I said within a year. And I know that sounds silly, son, but it really could be like a year.
You can't, and that's why. And so let's just talk about it theoretically. Then, if Yormark was to make that happen, if he were able to get those schools, if he was able to get, let's say he doesn't get Miami, but let's say that he is able to get, he's able to get Florida State, Clemson, Louisville, and
replace Miami with NC State, from what I understand.
Yeah, let's go with those four schools. When that next round of negotiation, man, you are a force at that point, because I've got the best basketball conference in the country. I've got two marquee top 10 brands in football, brands that are nationally known, brands that are nationally relevant, and I've got a slew of other good college football programs as well. There is a lot. His negotiation power is incredibly strengthened at that point, to the point almost where, if you have you're probably still third as a conference, but you're a lot closer to those two than you are right now.
Yeah, because again, being honest, it's two schools and a big gap, right? Right. If Yormark is able to get that done, the Big 12 is probably third, but that gap is a lot more narrow.
Gap's a lot more narrow, and I think you start to look at a future where you've got three conferences. I think right now, I think there's just such a feeling that, well, you've just got these two conferences. Then it starts to look at, and you're like, do you have a third conference at that point, and where exactly do you go from there? But the dude just gets it, and I think that's what's so just unique, being able to watch him from afar. And, being able to kind of watch it up close a little bit, is that there's always there's always another trick up his sleeves. There's never a point where you're like, man, dude, this guy just got caught. He knows exactly what's going on with the ACC right now, and he's going to be ready. He's going to be ready for this one. That's why it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and again, he knows what he's doing, right? Like, just goes back to it. Like, we didn't have confidence in the previous conference commissioner that Arizona dealt with. We have confidence in Yormark, and if he doesn't get it done, whatever it is he wanted, it sure as hell won't be for lack of effort.
All right. Now, David says, where does Miami fit if not the Big 12? Makes sense to go with FSU. Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, I think that's one that I could see being a better fit in the SEC, because I'm also, here's the thing. And I think we got to go back to this point that Sheer made, because it's a rare good point that we're going to actually run with here. But the point you made, though, is also, if I'm the SEC and I've got 4 guaranteed spots or whatever, and I'm looking and they're like, well, we're going to expand, I'm not exactly sure that I'm great. I'm super excited about bringing in Clemson or Florida State, because we've seen with Clemson. Now, Clemson has fallen off a little bit under Dabo, for sure. I get it. But let's be honest here. If that thing were to be rekindled here at any moment, I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. Florida State under Mike Norvell, they clearly have their guy. And so those are programs that I think you look at and you're like, they're not that far away. Whereas with Miami, I think there's a limit to Mario Cristobal. There's a limit to kind of that support that you have there as well. That to me is the third of all 3 of those.
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading some breaking college football news. Our boy Jed Tedford just retired.
I like Jeff Tedford.
I know.
Great deal.
Yeah. Health issues, just literally retired. Yeah, I mean, I think Miami. It's here's the deal. Like, also, like, you can replace schools and still feel pretty good about it. Meaning, like, if Arizona doesn't get Miami, or I'm sorry, if the Big 12 doesn't get Miami, it sucks. But you saw NC State, Virginia Tech, other schools, etc. And Yormark has wanted schools before and not got to them, like UConn. I think he wanted, but it wasn't necessarily approved because of the differential with football and basketball. These schools that he's looking at don't have that differential. And the SEC is not going to just lay over. Like, it wants guarantees because it feels that it runs college football, and maybe it does. But if it doesn't get those guarantees for whatever reason, that opens things up for the Big 12.
Yeah, it becomes very interesting at that point. Now, also, something that I think we need to talk about in Big 12, Bill, that I don't think has really been discussed, and that's Shady Rays. Listen. When you go into the Big 12, you might say to yourself, man, I need to have some really, really cool sunglasses to be able to, to deflect some of this amazing sunlight that is coming from these great Big 12 areas. Shady Rays. Shady Rays has been on this one from day one. Check it out. And again, look at those little cool Shady Rays in the corner. You can use code PHNX. You will thank me later on this. Now, here's the cool thing with Shady Rays. Exclusively for our listeners, my friends, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHNX for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Shady Rays is fantastic. That is, we agree on this.
The official glasses of Big 12 country.
Yes, we love Shady Rays. Check it out, Shady Rays. Now, one other read that I think we really need to get, besides Shady Rays, the Desert Financial Credit Union. All right, here's the deal. When you're in the desert, you're thinking to yourself, man, I could really use some money. And the Desert Financial Credit Union is here for you. Check it out. Desert Financial Credit Union. The great thing about the Desert Financial Credit Union is this. You can get $200 for signing up, my friends. We've seen Desert Financial Credit Unions all over the place. They are very cool. We would agree with this.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Now, so you might say to yourself, Mike, what can I do? So here's the deal with Desert Financial. When you open a free checking account online, get $200 in bonuses and get started by visiting desertfinancial.com/200. Again, everybody can use those $200. You can use that for whatever you want. Maybe some shades like Jason Shear has, my friend. Maybe some shades that Jason Shear has. And either way, check it out. The Desert Financial, desertfinancial.com/200. Another one, you will thank me later. Okay, now back to the Big 12 here. What I think also makes a lot of sense, though, and I think what people also have to kind of come to grips with is the fan bases in this conference are insane. They take a backseat to nobody. And I mean that to be honest with you, it was kind of overwhelming when we first started, doing this last year and, just talking about the Big 12, how overwhelming it was, because you're coming across fan bases that legitimately care, but are cool at the same time. That's something to keep in mind too. Like when you look at fan bases that they might be interested in adding, what kind of fit are they from a passion perspective? That's something that I think you got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's been fun. We'll see if the fun part continues during football season, but very respectful, really good conversations with other reporters and fans and all that. Yeah, I mean, in the passion, we said this before, like gone are the days of going on the road to Cal, with empty gyms and stadiums and Stanford and all that. These away environments are absolutely awesome.
We're going to talk about the Big 12 quarterback rankings tomorrow and get into that one a little bit. Now, and Dennis Stott, that is funny. Dennis Walsh says, and during this, we got rid of Tony Altimore. That was very funny, Dennis Walsh. That was funny. I have no problem with Tony. I think Tony's a good sport, but that was very funny. But yeah, last thing is just about Yormark though. Look at where we were 2 years ago. And with, where you were with Big 12 where you were with everything, Stuart Mandel was saying that this conference is basically gone. There's not going to be another, the Big 12 is essentially done. It's going to basically be the Mountain West. In no time flat, this dude has turned this into the best basketball conference in the country, clearly. And he's not that far away from making this a real relevant possibility in football as well, Sheer.
Yeah, I like Mendel, but didn't he say like the Big 12 contract would be like $25 a school?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best basketball conference in America. And adding those 4 teams, again, I think Louisville's potential, I mean, we've seen it, right? Like we've seen Louisville's basketball potential. It is there. Miami isn't awful. Clemson isn't awful. Florida State, there's been years where those teams are really good basketball-wise.
You're not adding any dregs to the conference, and I think that's where it becomes a little bit interesting. Now, one other thing, too, he's talked about possibly looking, and I think this is something else that we're going to talk about in weeks coming up as well. He talked about, looking at something where you can maybe split the basketball and the football revenue. I found that very fascinating in all of this, about being able to split the basketball and the football, or, basically add a Gonzaga as just obviously a basketball only school. But, just listening to him talk about it, I do think that this is something that I think he's really going to explore, because again, I think that he thinks that football is incredibly underrated, or basketball is incredibly underrated financially. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's going to prove that.
Yeah, I think that gets a little difficult. I mean, if anyone could do it, it's him. But that it is a very difficult thing to do, because if, let's say, you take Gonzaga in just basketball, you got to figure out what they have to do with the other sports and things like that. It's kind of a slippery slope, but yeah, I mean, nothing would surprise me with him, really. There were so many things that he said that intrigued me. The time windows too for games, exploring everything. Is Thursday and Friday nights going to be a permanent thing as opposed to a couple games a year? I don't know, but yeah, I mean, the good thing is he's not thinking backwards; he's thinking forwards, and that's important in this day and age.
What I like, yeah, exactly. What I think is also very fascinating about what he's able to do is also just like he's talking about looking into private equity and those type of things as well. If there are financial realms that are going to be able to be extracted that haven't been used before, he's going to use them. And, you see some of the reports about how some people in the SEC, they're a little bit worried about the private equity aspect. Yes, there is a reason they're worried about it, because they don't want it. They've got their king of the castle seat. They don't want other money coming in that could maybe be leveraged from other conferences. I think that's something you got to keep in mind. So anything that he can do, he's going to do. And that's why he doesn't care if a school's an AAU school or not, nor should he.
Yeah, it's all about the Benjamins. Let's be honest. It's all about the money, the success, all that.
Yes, I am. By the way, Stormy Cyclone says, wait till you guys come to Ames, #1 fan base in football and basketball. I am very excited to go to. I have heard very good things about. The Hilton Coliseum.
I'm not sure about Busch Light, though. I'm not sure about the Busch Light part.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't really. I don't really like Busch
Well, we don't
Light.
really drink a lot of that out there.
No,
Out
no, no,
here.
no, we don't. We drink Four Peaks, my friend. We drink Four
That's right.
Peaks.
Yeah,
Now,
we're Four Peaks country.
Louisville Cardinal. Yes, there you go. I got you there, Leah. Now,
We're good. We're good.
Now, this is the official Louisville Cardinal, I would assume. This is, again, Louisville generates more revenue than UConn in basketball, even when we're bad. What UConn is able, or what Louisville is able to do from a financial perspective, I think makes it incredibly intriguing because, again, their basketball is top 5 in the nation, whether they're good, whether they're bad, when it comes to being able to make that.
Yeah, I like Louisville. I got no, and again, like, yeah, there's been some rough times. I feel bad for that fan base. But they are, they earn the money, they bring the fans, and when they are good, they are good. And college basketball overall is better when a team like Louisville is good because of that passionate fan base.
Are they the KFC Yum? Is that the KFC Yum? Okay.
It used to be Papa John's, right?
What's that?
It used to be the Papa John's stuff, right?
Yeah, I like KFC more than Papa John's, so I'm okay with that.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, Brad Rich, the great Brad Rich. Another one, though, that also says that another guy with these 2 first names. We need to stay away from people with 2 first names. We always want to stay away from people like that. Brad Rich says the fact that Yormark doesn't care about AAU makes him dangerous to the other conferences. Yes, correct. He does. It makes him dangerous because, again, this guy is coming in here. You know what it is here with Yormark? He is saying, I do not care about your unwritten rules. I am going to do it the way that I want to do it. That is why we like him.
Yeah, he's like us, Brett Yormark's like us. We do what we want. We don't care about your stupid rules.
We do not care. We're going to talk a lot more about this tomorrow because I think it is interesting as well. Duke and North Carolina, nope, not going to happen. Those are especially
somewhere else.
Yeah, they'll be swooped up somewhere else. We're only giving you schools that we think might be able to occur. Now, before we sign off here, we got to get to a little bit of Arizona here, people. Got to get to a little bit of Arizona. We like you. Now all these other people stay on here as we talk about Arizona. Arizona got commitment. Muizz Tounkara, Arizona, a wide receiver out of Texas, talking with somebody on the staff. I'm just going to put it out right now. And if we could maybe get these highlights, Leah, that would be that would be awesome. Looking at this kid, he said that this coach said that he believes that this is going to be this could be the best player in the class when it's all said and done. He has no clue why he's not rated higher. He said it's a Texas thing, but he is big. He's physical. He's got hands. They expect him to be able to come in and compete immediately, Sheer, for a spot. Obviously, one that T-Mac's going to be out.
Yeah, again, like this receiver class as a whole is kind of ridiculous. Like, it's really well done, but this is a first day starter type of talent. Really big dude. If you look at the highlights, he's smooth. Great defense there. But but I mean, you could just tell, the instincts, the size and all that, the athleticism. I like the fact that he could play in multiple spots. He's good. He's a guy that they absolutely believe will be playing early on in the process.
One thing that we have definitely found out about Brent Brennan and this staff, and I think this is with going into Big 12 is that they are going to recruit. Texas is going to be a massive priority for them, and big receivers. We like big receivers, big, strong, physical people that lift weights from Texas. We are big fans of that, Jason Shearer. This is true.
Yeah, I got an article on the website today about recruiting Texas and how Brennan, top of Texas is as good as anyone, top of California, upper echelon and all that. They're going to be very heavy in Texas. And this isn't a BS fake effort like some previous coaches. This is we are going to be a force recruiting Texas.
And it makes perfect sense. You've got all these Texas fan bases that are okay, cool. You've got all these Texas fan bases that are totally good to go and are from Baylor to Texas Tech, you name it. It's easy to sell these kids wanting to play on it. So I'm seriously I'm like I said, I'm super excited about this. I think this is going to be a next level type. I think this is really going to help this coaching staff, and I'm glad that they're embracing it as well. Now, Big 12 Bobby, I agree with you. Need Texas linemen. That's going to be the one thing though with this staff. You're going to have
that gets a little difficult because Texas linemen Everyone wants Texas linemen, right? Hawaii linemen, I think, California linemen, Arizona linemen. If Arizona gets to a spot where it's landing top Texas linemen, the Brennan's on top of the world. Like that is very difficult to do.
That's why I also think it's very important to get the Polynesians in there. Because and that's something that I got to give Jed Fish credit on. It's the Jed Fish understood the Polynesian factor in that you're probably not going to get those big linemen out of the South. They're probably going to go to some big time schools and whatnot. But a lot of times when you get a Polynesian lineman, they can be kind of underrated. You look at your Wendell Muizz, you look at your Jonas Sabaneas, players like that, and they are big. They are very large people. And that's something that I think is, for an Arizona perspective, it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, and I trust Josh Oglesby. I think he's a good coach and a good recruiter. I like what they've brought in before. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult to get really good offensive linemen from Texas. So you go to Hawaii, you get the Polynesian players. You continue with that culture. You built the culture. You had the culture. I would assume that with Brennan and the people around him and how they recruit and who they recruit, that Polynesian part will always be part of the program, that Polynesian culture.
And then, so let's talk the wide receiver class. I would believe is probably done at this point. Now we got to talk a little bit about Muizz from Florida, speedster burner. What say you, Sheer?
So I have a couple notes written on him because a coach similar to your context loves this dude.
No way, it's not the same guy.
No, it's not the same guy. Kid is a freak. 100 meters, he ran a 10.4, 21.4, 200 meter, 6 foot, ran a 4.5 at the Under Armour, 10-foot broad jump. Mother was an NCAA All-American sprinter at Florida. Brother, 4-star top 200 player, had 22 touchdowns last year on 49 catches. Right. They love this dude. They think he is explosive.
Another dude, like when you're talking with Texas, you're talking Florida, you're talking California. There's just so much talent in those three spots that, I just kind of, again, I look at the offers and that's where to me it's a little bit more interesting. But this wide receiver class, they did a really, really good job. I also give them a lot of credit for taking inventory and saying that, yeah, T-Mac's awesome, but guess what? T-Mac's also going to be gone. Shear's guy, Montana Lamonius Craig, likely to be gone, even though he could come back. By the way, Shear, did you, you said that you thought that Montana would have more yards than Malachi Riley this season?
I didn't say that. I tell you right now, NCAA here comes out at 12 minutes. The starting receivers are, I don't know if this is public, whatever. The starting receivers are T-Mac, Raymelo Murphy, and Montana. I think I'm going to switch it up. I got to get my boy Malachi in there.
Make it happen. Make it happen. And again, Malachi Riley, by the way, guess Malachi Riley followed me the other day on Twitter. Wow. Malachi Riley, where have you been, my friend? I have been your biggest advocate. Malachi Riley is going to be my favorite new player of this coming year. Period. Point blank.
Are you turning your back on Speedy?
No, I'm not turning my back on Speedy. No. I said the new player.
Okay.
We need to be very, very clear about that. Okay. Now, for tomorrow, we're going to talk more recruiting, obviously. We're going to talk about the private equity part of all of this because I want to dig into this a little bit because I think it's very fascinating as to what the, what could do and where you could have all of this play out. We'll talk some more recruiting. We're going to talk Mo Crevis as well. Mo Crevis, the spacer extraordinaire. They are out there. Check it out. The spacer extraordinaire, Mo Crevis. Louisville Cardinal, very much like Louisville Cardinal fan. You should hop in here more often, my friend. I am a big fan of Rick Pitino, even though he's not there anymore. This is true, Sheer.
This is very true. You love Rick Pitino.
Yes. Now, Sheer, before we sign off, where can they find you doing your work?
Real quick, Mike, before I say that. So my dad had a kidney doctor appointment, right? And the doctor at the end says, can you do a favor for me? And he brings in his son. And his son happened to be at work with him. And his son said that they watch every day. Me and you and we took a picture together. So I think I had the name right. If I don't, I apologize. Arajan was his name. Okay. Shout out to you, man. That was awesome. You made my parents' day and my day. It was very cool. So thank you for watching. Very cool.
Very much appreciate that. And does that mean that also means that we can go at 10:30 as well tomorrow?
Yes, we will go at 10:30 tomorrow, which helps out quite a bit. Wednesday's a little more up in the air, but we're good at 10:30 tomorrow for sure. But shout out to him. Shout out to his dad. You can find me on Wildcat Authority, Wildcat Scoop Podcast with Shelby. We got a 50% off sale for 24 more hours. So please hit that up.
No better time also to become a PHNX diehard. You can hang out with Kobe and the great Erica L. Day and all kinds of good stuff. Merch, Discord, you name it, we got it. All kinds of good stuff. Yes, and I did mess up on the time zone. Tomorrow, it is 10:30 Pacific time. I am an idiot.
Embarrassing.
I am an idiot. I do apologize for that. But on that note, for Jason Shearer, for the great Leah behind the scene, Leah making us sound way better than we ever should. We very much appreciate Leah. And on that note, though, you've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 10:30 Pacific time, my friends.
We all silly like the mayor.